How many people are working for free? Do not buy real estate to give yourself a job. You're buying real estate to hopefully not have a job, right? So if you do not allocate and allot money to pay for a management fee, get yourself out of that job. Otherwise, you are buying a job. Hate to break it to you.
So I have a quick question. Show of hands, how many people own properties right now that own themselves? Okay, put them down. How many people, when they bought their first property, they ran a pro forma? I'm not talking just gross revenue, I'm talking revenue, expenses, debt, everything. Not a lot. We're gonna teach you guys how to run a pro forma today.
Yep.
So we're gonna teach you guys why a pro forma is necessary always. We're gonna talk about how to know your market and the conditions of the market. We're gonna teach you 3 tests for analyzing any deal to make sure that you do not lose money on a deal. And then we're actually gonna walk you through kind of what the template looks like. And maybe we'll give it away if we decide to.
If we're feeling generous today.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many of you have ever seen our pro forma? A few of you? Any good? Is it okay? Has it helped you? Has it saved you from any pitfalls there that you didn't think about, that you didn't see? That's what they're there to do. So it is our best attempt to get underwriting on the, what's up, man? How you, brother? It's our best attempt to get underwriting done on these subject properties to keep us from wasting time with banks, to keep us from deals that are just terrible. How many of you see them out there, right? They're listed all the time. It'll do this, and it won't cash flow. Defining what the items are that you need to look at, what you need to key in on. We're going to break it down into, essentially 3 areas that you've got to focus in on in order to understand the concepts of how performers can help you. And then we're going to even offer up down the road how we can expand that and get zeroed in on every little cost category.
So a little bit of background about myself and then John. So my life story is I'm a trained accountant, trained CPA background. But even before that, how many in here are here to get financial freedom? To not have to report to a boss, right? No W-2. So the day I knew I wanted to be financially free was actually when I was in my teens, and my dad had got laid off for work. He worked construction, Midwest, winter, layoffs happen. And so that month, I couldn't get to play travel basketball. It was hard for him to tell me that I couldn't play basketball that year. And that's when I knew I never wanted to have somebody else dictate my income. And that's why I strive to succeed in life and business and then ultimately real estate.
So a little bit about me. As you may have heard in the intro, I am from Memphis. It is the best place to come for barbecue, and it's also possibly the best place to get murdered in. So you've really got to watch that second one. But grew up in Memphis, very much middle-class family. Got into construction early on, just kind of going out there and on the grind. How many of you out there are just on the grind every day, right? A lot of folks in here, yep. There's times when you feel like that it'll make you rich, right? And that's about all it'll do, is most of the time just get you rich. It wasn't till I got into real estate that I learned about becoming wealthy, and being able to get back my time meant the absolute world to me. It changed the dynamic for my family. It changed the dynamic for my lifestyle of what I get to go do. And people that know me, people that get to hang with me, there's 2 things that it costs you. It's time and money. But time is infinitely more valuable than the money will ever be. And so once you get that concept there, once you understand those pieces, real estate is an awesome tool to help you achieve what you want to achieve there. So for those of you in the grind, those of you working at those things, there is hope to do it. I had to do whatever it took just to get on to my first real estate deal. I had to bring cash to the table. I had to beg a guy to just let me on. And then I got that first one under my belt. Fast forward 12 months and I had 74 units at the time. So I'm sitting on a portfolio right now of just over 130 units. And that is all with money that we've made ourselves. So nothing there that there's folks that do a lot of co-hosting, those kind of things. It's just a different game than what we've done.
So why are performance necessary always? How many times do you find yourself when you want to buy a deal that you have to tell yourself a story of why it's a good deal? Show of hands. Right?
You know you've all told them, right?
Yeah. And so we could tell how bad the deal is
with how long the story is, right?
So if you have to use a story to tell why the deal's a good deal, it's not a good deal. Let the numbers tell the story.
We always say that I want one sentence about how cool your property is, and then it's numbers the rest of the way. You get one sentence, but otherwise we do not care. It's justification, it's the thing. The more you have to reach into your mind, you're justifying it for yourself, and you know you're getting into a bad deal. We've sat there, we've listened to it, and we just we try to keep a straight face, but it just like we can't help but smile just a little bit because we know how bad the deal is about to be when they've got to go into such explanation. So see if you've caught yourself there and think about the deals that you've done.
Yeah, and you also have to factor in if what you have is what we call a lifestyle asset. So if it's in an area where you take your family on vacation, or I've talked to clients where they have a mother-in-law and in-law sick and they need the property there in case they have to take care of them. That's a different discussion, right? Then you have to discount your numbers for what they could do as a true investment property.
Yep.
Talk about knowing your market. Anybody look at what insurance costs in Florida right now? You really have to know your market, where you're investing at. HOA regulations, right? We're talking about insurance, tornadoes, hurricanes, a lot of stuff that's out of our control. And one of the things we're going to kind of get into, is it the next slide? Yeah, the seasonality is a big one. So tell them about the PCB units that you had this year. Last year that went live.
Yeah, so partners and I of mine were acquiring units in Panama City Beach. It's been a good market there. We've had a lot of growth in that market there. We still think that it's a kind of an underdog from a cash flow perspective, and it kind of checks all the boxes that we're looking for there. And getting used to what the seasonality is of these units there, we made some mistakes kind of going into it. Not catching the snowbirds and having to factor that piece in, made some impacts on not only our cash flow piece, but our overall investment of what we wanted to do with it. So because we did not have that projected out there in far enough in advance, that's where we kind of fell short. So the great news is about this stuff is that because we have repeatable seasonality, it's okay, this is how we did this past month, and we're going to do this different going into next year.
So some other factors to consider. This is probably the number one thing I see people miss the most is property taxes. So when you buy a property, typically the property taxes get reassessed, so they go up in value. Or same thing if you go to build a home, new construction. And a lot of investors are not taking into account how high the property tax bill is going to go up once they buy a property. Also, if you stick around for tomorrow, what do you guys do tomorrow? If you stick around tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about cost segregation at the main stage. And if you are a high income earner and you need to be able to shield some of your income from your W-2 or rentals, where you buy real estate is really important, because if you buy on the beach or in the ocean or anywhere in California, the land's worth a lot of money. And so you don't get to write off as much on your taxes. So luckily enough, it's all public record. So you could go, whatever property you're looking at, I typically tell people, take the 3 to 5 recent comps. Go find 3 properties that just sold within the last year, similar square footage, similar bedroom count, and see how high did their property taxes go up. And you could extrapolate that percentage increase to your deal, but then you're also going to know how much is it going to save you in taxes.
Yep. And that's a big one in the multifamily space. So, it's one thing to copy in, this is what they're paying for insurance, right? People have seen that. And they're happy, homeowners who are selling now are happy to provide you, this is what they've been paying for insurance, knowing full well that the insurance today is vastly different, right? Much more expensive. The miss on that, you can talk about a line item that may run you 6%, may eat into you almost 12%. of your revenue piece there. So it can have high impact for a lot of these key areas that we're talking about.
Well, talk a little bit about HOAs too. I mean, if you're buying a property, do not rely on your realtor to let you know if the HOA allows STRs. We've heard some horror stories of people that have trusted, and not that you can't trust a realtor, but we've heard people that have trusted in others, and it turns out that they can't even STR there.
Yep.
And a lot of these deals, I mean, especially in Florida, it's only going to cash flow or even make money as an STR. So like when we got started, we used to write short-term rental deals based on long-term rents as a worst-case scenario. In case we couldn't rent it out, we could always long-term rent it. But if you're in an HOA and they decide that they don't want to allow short-term rentals anymore, you're screwed and you need an exit plan. So always look at either the bylaws of the HOA, CCRs, but also the proposed, like look in the minutes of the previous meetings, because it'll tell you what the sentiment is towards short-term rentals in the area.
Yep, and a lot of things that we're dealing with now with HOAs is new assessments that are coming in. So you can't just take on the face value of, well, this is what it is, for the dues. You want to take the dues into consideration with how much assessments, have happened over the last 12-month period there. You are responsible for your own due diligence, nobody else. When it comes to looking these things up, you need to see it firsthand. Don't say, well, I got it from so-and-so and then they requested it from so-and-so. There's just too many hands in there. This stuff's easily verifiable, right? It does take a little effort to get there, but from the stories that we've heard, making those few extra steps there can, save the deal or go ahead and, kill it.
So remember, there's 3 tests to analyzing a good deal. Hey, quick question. Anybody here listen to Dave Ramsey, like when you were younger? Okay. So I used to be a Dave Ramsey disciple before I started learning, kind of like Robert Kiyosaki-ish, about debt and leverage. Dave Ramsey's all the way over here, Kiyosaki's over here. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. But Dave Ramsey used to say something. He used to say that math works in all 50 states, right? So he would break down people's budgets. Didn't matter if you lived in California, Illinois, New York. He would say that math works in all 50 states. And the same thing applies when you're analyzing a deal. So a lot of us know, hey, California may not be as the highest cash flowing market, it's more of appreciation. Versus somewhere in the Midwest, it might be more cash flow and less appreciation. But with these 3 tests, what we're teaching you is it's not really to look at the numbers, but the percentages. Of each of these in relation to your deal. So talk a little bit about the gross revenue test.
Yeah, so who was here for the session right before this? Kenny Bedwell, STR Insights? Okay, study that stuff that he tells you to study. We've been working with Kenny for 3 years now. We understand how to look at markets, how to understand what the gross revenue data is, and how to not be fooled by some of the, quirks in the software system that says this should be putting out X, right? We're looking for multiple sources to verify. You can talk with management companies on the ground. You can do kind of the math yourself as for doing testing. You can look at Rabu, AirDNA, STR Insights. We use all of those sources in order to come to an average revenue number that we're expecting there. If you do not get your revenue number right, the rest of it's wrong. The rest of it is wrong. So we have to start with that gross revenue there, and we have to understand that dialing that in and making sure that we're an expert on that piece, everything else, has a general rule of understanding from that piece.
Yeah, for the gross revenue too, he had mentioned some of the softwares you can use. So STR Insights, AirDNA, Data Rabu. The gross revenue test that we recommend is 15% minimum is what we're looking at. So when you take your purchase price of your property, and we're gonna walk through it in a second, when you take the purchase price of your property, your deal, and multiply by 15%, that should be what you're aiming for in terms of gross revenue.
Yep, and that's your starting line, right? We would say that the 15% mark is really where you wanna be if you've got something that you wanna incorporate as a lifestyle asset, right? It's not gonna always carry depending on what the debt scenario is, but we really want to be in that 15, 20% is probably ideal. It's a little harder to come by those, but you got to do a lot of searching, right?
Yeah, and then the operating expense ratio is how much are you spending out of your gross revenue? How much are you spending a month on your carrying costs? So these are going to be every single expense outside of your mortgage principal and your interest. So step number 1, gross revenue test, at least 15%, aim for 15%. Step number 2, operating expense ratio. We have found that in these deals, and being a CPA for over 300 real estate investors, we filed thousands of tax returns for real estate investors, and I may or may not have a Google sheet somewhere that has every single property in each market and what they do in gross revenue and expenses, but again, another story for another day. But we have typically found that on average, especially if you're a newer host, that your expenses in relation to your gross revenue is going to be somewhere between 35 to 40%.
Yep.
And so right away, if you can get that revenue number right, I got my 15% of my 500K, well, if that's 75,000, 80,000, I know my expenses are going to be close to 40% of that, okay? Now, here's the trick with this. So my dad used to always say too, he said, stuff takes twice as long to do and it costs twice as much. And so when you're doing this, even if you analyze your deal and your operating expense comes in at 32, 33%, bump it up to 40 anyway. Plug in, that's your, if shit hits the fan and I have to spend an extra $500 a month on this property, I'm still gonna make money. So when you're doing the pro forma, even if your expense comes out to 33, 34% of your revenue, it's always good to just add stuff in there as a litmus test almost.
Yep, and we see this is what underwriting is, right? This is where, a lot of times when we're going to the bank, right? Sometimes it's a little tougher for them to understand what the real expense numbers are. It's even tougher to get them to understand what the real revenue numbers are. And so we build in these, okay, we're gonna put a line at 40%, and that's what we're just gonna go ahead and put there. They look at that as conservative underwriting, which is gonna be more likely for you to get bankable and for you to get the loan.
Yeah, and if you follow these principles too, what it really is supposed to provide you is almost a back of the napkin test. So you have a deal that comes in, and you need to know within 10 minutes or not if it's going to be worthwhile to keep pursuing, because time is important. We're all very busy, so we need to know right away if a deal is going to be worth pursuing. And these 3 steps allow you to do that. Because again, if we know where our gross revenue is going to be based off other comps in the area, previous other homeowners, leverage other hosts in that area if they're willing to share information. And if you know what it's going to gross, again, you could right away take out 40% for expenses. And then it comes down to what your debt looks like. How many people bought properties using just regular conventional loans? What about secondary home loan? How about DSCR? Okay, so that's where this debt service is important, because the less conventional conforming finance you're going to get, typically the more points and the higher rate you're going to pay. But we've seen deals where people hit the gross revenue and they hit the operating expense ratio test, but they just bought at the wrong time. Like their debt, their debt was too high. Maybe they bought at 8%, some points. And so if they are still breaking even or making money, and the rates do go down, which if somebody says the rates are going to go down, don't believe them. You cannot bank on the rates going down in the future. You need to underwrite a deal that's going to make you money today. It's funny. We were at a boot camp in Nashville. Was it 2022? Mm-hmm. And I was teaching this, and I told this story, and there was a lady I told this lady, I said, hey, you made the revenue mark, your expenses were good, you just bought at the wrong time. And she raised her hand in the crowd. She's like, oh yeah, that's me. Is she here? She's not here. So all 3 of these are important.
Yeah, and I would say that my cheat on debt service, okay, and this is one that I actually have not revealed to really anybody.
I've never heard it.
You have never heard this. I will take a property. I will find out their ask price. I will immediately calculate the debt service piece, and I will either move forward or eliminate that property based on the percentage range before ever even messing with the expenses. Because if the debt service does not work, the deal's off. And how long does it take us to run debt service, right? They got calculators all over the place. So if you get in there and you're getting into your debt service, you can quickly turn it down or turn it up of, yeah, we're gonna move this forward or we're not. Back when we were pre-COVID, we were looking at around 22 to 26% on debt service. That's about what that percentage ranged there. Now we're looking at closer to 28, max of about 32, 34%. And past that point, it's a no-go for me. So find out what your comfort zone is there and be sure to run that test first before ever having to get into the expenses of what number is going to work for that property.
Yeah, we're going to demo it in a second, but let's say your gross revenue on a property is $10K a month. Your debt service, your monthly principal and interest should be no more than $3,200 a month. Quick math for everybody? Good? Because then you're going to know that your operating expenses are going to cost $4,000 a month, right? And if you have a desired cash on cash or how much you want to make out of the deal, you really need to keep these tests in line to make sure that you're taking money home. So we got the foundation, understanding all the percentages. Because here's the thing, when people send me pro formas, I don't even look at the numbers. I just look at the percentages in relation to the numbers. Because I'll know right away, if your operating expenses are not close to 30% at least, I know you're under accounting for something. Because we've seen hundreds and thousands of properties, and this is what these things cost to run.
These notes in here, we've built into this pro forma to help understand. You've got to understand who the author is and why they wrote it this way. You can't take a sheet that you just see online and it was a quick thing and they made you click and it's like, oh, well, they just sent it to me for free, if you don't understand why and how it was written. So what we tried to do in here is try to go in and try to just write through some notes. Let's take closing costs, for instance. Well, what's included with closing costs? How do you calculate that? Anybody know? Anybody know what it offhand of like what it includes and everything else? Well, here's a note that says title fees, state fees, document loan fees. You've got your origination fees. Historically, we've seen this more than covered with a 3%. So when you're quickly analyzing this, if we're plugging 3%, that can just get you to that next phase a little quicker there. So this is how to understand the author behind the spreadsheet. And that's a key point there. So what he was asking about is that if you look on this here and it's got reno and furnishings, right? So we know what the purchase price is. We understand what our closing costs are. But what about those reno and furnishings, right? That's money that's out of pocket, and it can come from two sources, okay? In commercial loans, okay, it can come from the lender themselves, fronting 80%, sometimes 90% of those costs. In more stabilized conventional loans, they want you to pay for those all out of pocket, right? So having a pro forma that will do both, it's simply a plug and play, and we can get down into the mortgage calculation because that affects your mortgage piece, and then that's going to affect obviously your debt service and everything else. We've got a more advanced version that will allow you to plug and extrapolate it out, but it will not do that in the basic version. Why do I not want to put this here in the basic version? Because if I confuse you now, you won't get to the advanced versions. So we wanted to make this as simple as we could to try to speed up the process to get everybody comfortable with it, and then bring it up to something that we have way more advanced than this.
Yeah, and really the point of it too is you could use anybody's deal calculator. Like I have one, Kenny's got one, me and Kenny have one together. Everybody's got a deal calculator, but it doesn't matter the calculator, it's do you know how to use it? Do you know how to look at a deal calculator and see if it's actually gonna make money or not? So if we just give you the template without teaching you guys how to use it, it's like giving you a fishing pole and not teaching you how to fish. It's worthless, right? It all depends on whose hands is it in, and do they have the mindset to know and understand it. So just looking at this, so purchase price, what's the purchase price?
$515.
$515. Annual revenue, you'll see to the right, $111,000 on this particular deal. So that already checks the box on the 15% calculation. And then so if we scroll down a little bit, we can see all of our operating expenses on a monthly and an annual basis. That comes out, so your expenses on that one were 44%?
Including our management fee.
Ah.
How many of you include a management fee on your pro formas?
How many people manage their own properties? Ah.
And a show of hands real quick, how many people are working for free? Do not buy real estate to give yourself a job. You're buying real estate to hopefully not have a job, right? So if you do not allocate and allot money to pay for a management fee, it doesn't have to be 15, 20%, 25%, but it has to be some kind of nominal number there to get yourself out of that job. Otherwise, you are buying a job. Hate to break it to you. So we've got our total cash flow. Our total cash outlay is just over $200,000 in this, which means, Brian, we paid for those reno and furnishings out of pocket here. Okay, this is where those return rates will change once we get if we get those things financed.
Let me take a step back.
Go ahead.
So he gave you like the Memphis version of it. Let me give you the more actually the more watered down version. So when you use a conventional loan and you're going to buy a short-term rental, the banks will not finance the furniture that has to go into it. So if I'm buying a $500,000 property, I have to also figure out what my furniture budget is, and I have to come out of pocket with that. On these commercial loans, a lot of banks will allow you to wrap your down payment and your renovation costs or your furniture into the loan balance. You will typically see it's about 15% of the down payment, or 15% of the purchase price, and then 15% of the reno. There's some banks that will allow you to wrap that in. So instead of, if I have, on my last deal, we had to spend $75,000, $80,000 to fix it up. But we were able to wrap it into the loan. So instead of having to come out of pocket $80,000, I'm able to wrap it into the loan and pay it off over 30 years. Or on a commercial loan, they're typically 20-year AM.
And if you're calculating a cash-on-cash return, think about what that does when you're eliminating most of your cash that's coming out of pocket and wrapping it into the loan, which is going to allow you to increase your cash-on-cash return. It's going to sweeten your deal, and that's what banks are looking for. Last thing I'm going to give you guys real quick here is what's important is our notes section down here. Fixed expense total, break-even occupancy, and break-even percentage there. So that's a key piece that most pro formas do not have and will not have that you need to be understanding of. I have a debt on this property and I have obligations of $5,200 essentially in fixed expense before I ever have a guest. That means that I need to occupy a minimum of 10 nights here or 32% occupancy in order to break even. Some of you are out there and you're saying, hey, you know what? I just want a property that just pays for itself, right? That is such a low standard to go after. I do not want to hear anybody in this room or any friends of anybody in this room saying, I just want a property to pay for itself. So there are much easier ways to achieve the goals that you're looking for, get the properties that you want there. They do take time, they do take money, and they do take pro forma writing.
Yeah, so we taught you how to fish, and we're gonna give you the fishing pole too. Was this helpful, you guys? Anybody?
It's all right.
It's all good?
I know this is we are crunched for time here. This is a lot of information to kind of give and to kind of regurgitate, really. This is something that we do every day. But we do want to give you this pro forma for showing up today. And we're going to have a QR code to scan that in to get that downloaded.
Yeah, so it's color coded, by the way. So
yes.
Do you enter in black?
Yeah, she asked about our cells locked, right? Do not mess with the spreadsheet unless you are really, really, really smart, because one number off, your formula will go bad, or even worse, your formula will not show you that it's bad.
Is that working for you?
And you'll be running through and you'll get bad data out of it. So if you've got pro forma questions, if you've got items that you've been wondering or want to know something that's in there, not in there, we're going to go ahead and shoot you an email, prompt those questions to see what you guys may want to have covered, and then we're going to go over all that on next week. Thank y'all.
Water.